The forest was Emily's sanctuary. It was a place where the cacophony of the city melted away, replaced by the symphony of rustling leaves, bird song, and the gentle whisper of the wind through ancient pines. For years she had lived on its edge, in a small cottage her grandmother had left her, its stone walls draped in ivy and its garden a riot of colorful, untamed life. As a botanical illustrator, the forest was not just a refuge but also her muse and her office. She spent her days hiking its winding paths, a leather-bound sketchbook and a set of charcoal pencils her only companions, documenting the rare and the beautiful. Today she was in pursuit of a ghost. The phantom orchid, a flower of ethereal, almost translucent beauty, was said to bloom only once a decade, and only in the deepest, most undisturbed parts of the woods. Local legend claimed it grew in the shadow of the Wolf's Jaw, a jagged rock formation deep within the territory locals wisely avoided. But for Emily, the pull of the orchid was stronger than an old wives' tale. She had packed a small bag with water, some food and her art supplies, and set off at dawn, venturing further than she ever had before. The air grew different here. Thicker. The familiar scent of damp earth and pine was layered with something else, something musky and wild. An unnerving silence had fallen, the cheerful chirping of birds fading into a watchful quiet. Emily pushed the feeling aside, her artist's focus zeroed in on her prize. She checked her compass, her boots crunching softly on a carpet of fallen leaves, her eyes scanning the dense undergrowth. A prickling sensation crawled up the back of her neck, the undeniable feeling of being watched. She paused, her hand hovering over the hilt of the small utility knife on her belt, and slowly scanned the trees around her. There was nothing but shifting shadows and the monolithic trunks of ancient oaks. She told herself it was just the isolation playing tricks on her mind. She was trespassing on nature's private domain after all. Yet the feeling persisted, a heavy weight in the air that spoke of a predator's gaze. She quickened her pace, the thrill of her quest now tainted with a growing unease. Finally, through a thicket of ferns she saw it, the wolf's jaw, its granite teeth biting at the sky. And there, nestled at its base, was a cluster of pale, glowing blossoms, the phantom orchid. A gasp of pure delight escaped her lips, fear momentarily forgotten. They were more beautiful than any illustration she had ever seen. She dropped to her knees, pulling out her sketchbook and pencils, her fingers flying across the page as she tried to capture their delicate, otherworldly grace. She was so engrossed in her work, in the precise curve of a petal and the subtle gradient of its color, that she didn't hear the snap of a twig behind her. She didn't sense the massive shadow that fell over her until it was too late. The growl that rumbled through the clearing was no sound she had ever heard before. It was a deep, guttural vibration that seemed to shake the very ground beneath her, resonating in her bones and seizing her heart in a grip of pure, primal fear. Slowly, terrified, she lifted her head. Standing not 10 feet from her was a wolf. But it was no ordinary wolf. It was a monster from a dark fairy tale, a creature of impossible size. Its fur was the color of midnight, its shoulders were as broad as a man's, and its eyes burned with a terrifying, golden intelligence. They were not the eyes of a beast. They were the eyes of a king, and they were fixed on her with an expression of cold, absolute fury. Emily was frozen, her charcoal pencil slipping from her numb fingers. The sanctuary had become a trap, and she had just come face to face with its savage, terrifying ruler. Chapter 2: The King in Wolf's Clothing. Time seemed to warp and stretch, each second an eternity under the crushing weight of the Lycan's stare. The creature didn't move, its massive form a statue carved from shadow and rage. Its golden eyes tracked her every trembling breath, a low, menacing growl continuing to vibrate in its chest. Emily's mind, which had been filled with the delicate beauty of the orchid moments before, was now a blank slate of terror. Every instinct screamed at her to run, but her legs were leaden, her body refusing to obey. She was prey, cornered and helpless. The wolf took a single, deliberate step forward. The movement was fluid, a ripple of immense power contained within its muscular frame. The scent she had noticed earlier, musk, pine and something uniquely masculine, intensified, overwhelming her senses. He was the apex predator of this domain, and she had trespassed into his throne room. As he drew closer, she could see the sharp intelligence in his gaze, the controlled fury that promised a swift and brutal end. Her hand, moving on its own, fumbled for the utility knife at her belt. It was a pathetically small defense against such a monstrous creature, but it was all she had. The moment her fingers brushed the handle, the wolf's growl deepened into a furious snarl, its lips pulling back to reveal a set of long white canines that gleamed like daggers in the dim forest light. It was a clear warning. But as the beast took another step, something else happened. The air around it seemed to shimmer, to crackle with an unseen energy. Emily watched, her terror momentarily eclipsed by sheer disbelief, as the creature's form began to shift and contort. The sound of cracking bones and tearing flesh filled the air, a sickening symphony of transformation. The wolf grew, its spine elongating as it rose onto two legs. Fur receded into tanned skin, massive paws reshaped into hands, and the savage lupin snout shortened and reformed into the hard, angular lines of a human face. In moments, the monstrous wolf was gone. In its place stood a man of equally terrifying presence. He was tall, towering over her, with a physique that spoke of raw, untamed power. His bare chest and arms were crisscrossed with faint, silvery scars, and his skin seemed to radiate a palpable heat. His hair was as black as the wolf's pelt, and his eyes were the same burning gold, now set in a face that was brutally handsome and etched with an expression of pure, undiluted rage. He was naked, yet he stood with the unshakable authority of a king, his fury a tangible cloak around him. "Who are you?" he snarled, his voice a low, gravelly rumble that was even more intimidating than his growl had been. "What are you doing in my territory?" Emily couldn't find her voice. She could only stare, her mind struggling to process the impossible thing she had just witnessed. A man had turned into a wolf. A wolf had turned into a man. "Answer me," he roared, taking a thunderous step toward her. She flinched back, stumbling over a tree root and landing hard on the ground. Her sketchbook scattered, the delicate drawing of the orchid landing face up at his feet. He glanced down at it, his golden eyes narrowing. Then they snapped back to her, a flicker of something unreadable in their depths before being consumed by rage once more. "You have seen what you should not have seen." Suddenly there was another presence. A second man, fully clothed in dark, functional attire, stepped silently out from the trees. He was broad and muscular, with a calmer but no less dangerous aura. His eyes, a steady hazel, assessed the scene quickly. "Jason," he said, his voice even. "She's just a human. She looks lost." The man called Jason didn't take his eyes off Emily. "She is a trespasser, Dwayne. She saw me. She saw everything." The finality in his tone sent a chill colder than any winter wind down Emily's spine. This was Jason, and his gaze held her fate. He was the judge, jury, and executioner in this dark, impossible forest, and she had been found guilty. Chapter 3. The Gilded Cage. "She cannot be allowed to leave," Jason declared, his voice leaving no room for argument. The words, spoken with such cold certainty, sealed Emily's fate. Dwayne, the calmer of the two, gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod. His gaze on Emily was not unkind, but it was filled with a resolute duty that was just as damning. Fear gave way to a surge of desperate adrenaline. "You can't do this," Emily stammered, scrambling back until her shoulders hit the rough bark of an oak tree. "I won't tell anyone. I swear. I didn't see anything." Jason let out a short, humorless laugh. "You will lie to our faces? After what you just witnessed?" He took a step closer, and Emily instinctively pressed herself harder against the tree, wishing the ancient wood could swallow her whole. "Your scent is thick with terror. It's a scent I know well. It is the scent of those who would run to their villages and whisper stories of monsters in the woods, bringing hunters and fire down upon my people." His people. The words hung in the air, hinting at a world far larger and more complex than just the two men, or creatures, before her. He spoke with the weight of a leader, a protector. A king. He gestured curtly to Dwayne. "Take her." Before Emily could protest further, Dwayne was there. He moved with a silent, efficient grace that was unnerving. He offered her a hand, his expression one of polite but firm regret. "It will be easier if you don't fight," he said, his voice calm and reasonable, a stark contrast to Jason's raw fury. Knowing she had no choice, Emily reluctantly took his hand. His grip was like steel. They led her through the dense woods, away from the familiar paths and deeper into the heart of the forest. The journey was a blur of towering trees and shifting shadows, Jason leading the way with a predatory stride, not once looking back. They eventually arrived at a massive fortress-like manor built of dark stone and heavy timber. It rose from the forest floor as if it were a natural part of the landscape, imposing and ancient. This was no simple cabin in the woods. It was a stronghold. Inside the manor was a shocking contradiction. The architecture was rustic and formidable, with vast stone hearths and heavy wooden beams, but it was furnished with an unexpected luxury. Rich tapestries depicting epic wolf hunts hung on the walls, plush rugs covered the flagstone floors, and intricately carved furniture was arranged throughout the cavernous rooms. It was the den of a wealthy and powerful beast, a gilded cage. Dwayne led her to a large, well-appointed room on the second floor. A fire was already crackling in the hearth, and a four-poster bed with plush, fur-lined blankets dominated the space. "You will be comfortable here," he said, his tone suggesting this was a kindness she should appreciate. "You will not be harmed so long as you do not try to leave." The moment he closed and locked the heavy wooden door behind him, Emily's mind began to race. He was a prisoner. She rushed to the windows, her heart sinking as she saw they were barred with ornate but unbreakable ironwork. Below, the ground was a sheer drop onto a stone courtyard patrolled by two more large, grim-faced men. There would be no easy escape. Panic set in, a claustrophobic wave that made the large room feel like a shrinking box. She couldn't stay here. She wouldn't be a captive. 4 hours she paced the room, testing the walls, examining the lock, searching for any weakness. As dusk settled, casting long, menacing shadows across the room, she found one. A small, overlooked dumbwaiter shaft hidden behind a loose tapestry near the fireplace. It was a tight squeeze and she had no idea where it led, but it was a chance. With her heart pounding in her chest, she pried open the small door and squeezed inside, lowering herself down the dusty rope pulley system into the darkness below. It was a terrifying, suffocating descent that ended with a soft thud in what appeared to be a pantry or wine cellar. Silently, she crept out, her eyes adjusting to the gloom. She could hear voices from a nearby room, the deep, rumbling tones of Jason and Dwayne. Following a narrow corridor, she found a small, barred window that looked out onto the forest. Freedom was just a few feet away. Using a loose stone from the wall, she began to work frantically at the rusty iron hinges, the metallic scraping sound deafening in the silence. Just as one of the hinges groaned and broke free, a shadow fell over her. "Going somewhere?" a voice of cold silk asked. Emily froze, her blood turning to ice. A woman stood there, her form wreathed in shadows. She was tall, impossibly beautiful, with hair the color of spun silver and eyes like chips of ice. A cruel, possessive smirk played on her lips. It was a look that said Emily was not a guest or even a prisoner. She was a new toy to be broken. Chapter 4. The Spark of Defiance. The woman stepped out of the shadows, her movements as fluid and predatory as the king's. She circled Emily slowly, a hunter examining a snared rabbit. Her beauty was sharp and severe, her high cheekbones and pointed chin giving her an almost foxy appearance. She was dressed in fine, dark leather that clung to her like a second skin, emphasizing a warrior's physique. This was no pampered lady of the manor, she was a fighter. "I am Ryla," she said, her voice a low purr that held an undercurrent of menace. "And you are the little stray our king dragged in from the woods. You are even less impressive up close." Her icy eyes raked over Emily's simple hiking clothes, smudged with dirt from her escape attempt, with open disdain. Emily's fear was quickly being replaced by a hot, simmering anger. She had been stalked, captured by a monster, and imprisoned. She would not be intimidated by this woman. "And you must be the welcoming party," Emily retorted, her voice shaking only slightly as she pushed herself to her feet. "Forgive me for not waiting for the official tour." Ryla's smirk widened, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Clever. I do so enjoy it when the prey has a little fight in it. It makes the game more interesting." She took another step, invading Emily's personal space. The scent of ozone and cold fury rolled off her. "But you should know your place, human. You are nothing here. You are a piece of property, a secret to be kept. And secrets that become troublesome have a way of disappearing." Ryla's hand shot out, grabbing a fistful of Emily's hair and yanking her head back. Emily cried out in pain as Ryla's face loomed inches from hers. Jason may be intrigued by your novelty for now, she hissed, but his patience is thin. He is the king. And I, she added, her voice dropping to a possessive whisper, am his future queen. Do not for a second think you can change that. Something inside Emily snapped. She was tired of being afraid, of being treated like a thing. In a surge of pure, unthinking defiance, she did the only thing she could. She spat directly in Ryla's face. The act was met with a moment of stunned, deathly silence. Ryla's beautiful face contorted into a mask of pure, murderous rage. Her eyes, which had been icy blue, flashed with an unnatural silver light. Her grip on Emily's hair tightened painfully, and her other hand drew back, nails elongating into sharp black claws. You wretched little. Enough. The single word cut through the tension like a blade. Jason stood at the entrance to the corridor, his massive frame blocking out the light. Dwayne was just behind him, his expression grim. Jason's golden eyes were fixed on the scene, his face an unreadable mask of stone. He walked forward slowly, his heavy footfalls echoing in the cellar. He didn't look at Ryla. His burning gaze was locked entirely on Emily. Ryla immediately released Emily, shoving her to the ground. She turned to Jason, her expression shifting from fury to a wounded, possessive anger. Jason, this thing. It attacked me. Jason ignored her completely. He came to a stop directly in front of Emily, who was still on the floor, breathing heavily, her scalp aching. He crouched down, bringing them eye to eye. The sheer force of his presence was suffocating. She expected him to erupt, to punish her for her insolence, for daring to cause trouble in his home. His jaw was tight, a muscle pulsing with barely controlled rage. The air crackled, and for a heart-stopping moment she thought he would strike her. His gaze flickered from her defiant eyes down to her trembling lips and back again. The silence stretched, thick and heavy with unspoken threats. When he finally spoke, his voice was a low, dangerous growl, a rumble that vibrated through her very core. It was a sound that was equal parts fury and something else, something she couldn't name. A raw, astonished intrigue. Do that one more time, he roared, the sound echoing off the stone walls. It was not a request. It was a dare, a challenge, and a threat that promised consequences she couldn't possibly imagine. But beneath the ruthless command, a spark had been lit. In a world where all bowed before him, this small, fragile human had shown no fear. And the Ruthless Lycan King found himself utterly captivated by it. Chapter 5. A Glimmer of the Man. The echo of Jason's roar faded into a tense, ringing silence. Ryla stood frozen, her face a mixture of shock and fury at being so utterly dismissed. Dwayne watched from the corridor, his expression carefully neutral, but his eyes were sharp, missing nothing. Jason remained crouched before Emily, his golden eyes still locked on hers, the fire in them banking from a furious inferno to a low, simmering heat. He had commanded her, dared her, and in that moment the power dynamic between them shifted from simple captor and captive to something infinitely more complex and dangerous. Finally he rose to his full, intimidating height. Dwayne, he commanded without looking away from Emily. Escort Ryla out. And have a guard posted at this cellar entrance. It seems our guest is more resourceful than she appears. Ryla bristled, opening her mouth to protest, but one withering glance from Jason silenced her. With a final venomous look at Emily, she spun on her heel and stormed away, Dwayne following stoically in her wake. Now they were alone. The air in the cellar felt thick, charged with unspoken words. Jason extended a hand down to Emily. It was not a gentle offer but a command. Hesitantly she took it. His skin was warm, his grip firm, and a strange jolt like static electricity shot up her arm at the contact. He pulled her to her feet with effortless strength, not releasing her hand immediately. His thumb brushed over her pulse point, feeling the frantic rabbit-like beat of her heart. You are a foolish creature, he said, his voice softer now but no less intense. Ryla is the lead warrior of my guard. She could have torn your throat out before you drew your next breath. Then maybe you should teach your warriors some manners. Emily shot back, her courage however reckless, refusing to desert her. She tugged her hand free from his grasp. A ghost of a smile, so fleeting she almost missed it, touched his lips. Manners are a luxury we cannot always afford. We are surrounded by enemies. The Blood Moon Pack probes our borders, testing for weakness. They would see nothing but a human plaything in our midst, a vulnerability to be exploited. He was explaining himself, she realized with a jolt of surprise. The ruthless king was justifying his actions. He began to walk, gesturing for her to follow him out of the cellar and up a winding stone staircase. He led her not back to her room but to a vast library. Bookshelves stretched from floor to ceiling, filled with leather-bound volumes that looked centuries old. A massive stone fireplace dominated one wall, a low fire casting a warm, flickering glow over the room. At the center was a large oak table covered not in books but in maps, marked and annotated with strategic symbols. This was his war room. He stood before the fire, his back to her, staring into the flames. The rigid, intimidating posture of the king seemed to fall away, replaced by the weary slump of a man carrying an immense burden. "My father ruled with diplomacy," he said, his voice a low murmur. "He made treaties, sought peace. And for his efforts he was betrayed and slaughtered by the blood moons, his pack decimated in a surprise attack when I was just a boy." He turned to face her, and in the firelight she saw the raw pain etched in the hard lines of his face. The golden eyes that had burned with such fury now held a deep, ancient sorrow. "I learned a different lesson that day," he continued. "Strength is the only law that matters. Fear is a more effective shield than any treaty. I am what I have to be to keep my people safe. To ensure what happened to my father never happens again." In that moment, Emily saw past the monster, past the ruthless Lycan King. She saw a glimpse of the man beneath, a man forged in tragedy, hardened by duty, and utterly alone in his staggering responsibility. He was still dangerous, still her captor, but he was no longer a simple villain in her story. He was something more, something tragically, compellingly human. He caught her watching him, his guard snapping back into place, the vulnerability vanishing as quickly as it had appeared. The tension in the room shifted once more, from fear to a fragile, tentative understanding. "Stay away from Ryla," he warned, his voice regaining its harsh edge. "She will not be so easily dismissed a second time." It was a threat, but it was also, strangely, a warning meant to protect her. And that small, almost imperceptible sign of concern was more dangerous to Emily's heart than all his previous rage had been. Chapter 6. The Gilded Cage's Unseen Corners. The days that followed blurred into a strange, monotonous routine. Emily was a ghost haunting the opulent halls of her prison, confined to her room and the adjacent library. The initial frantic terror had receded, leaving in its place a quiet, watchful curiosity. She had tested her gilded cage and found its bars to be absolute. The guards at the entrances were silent and unmoving as the stone they were carved from. Escape was impossible, so she adapted. Her jailer, in a practical sense, was Dwayne. He brought her meals 3 times a day, his presence a calm, steady counterpoint to the volatile energy that seemed to radiate from the manor's other occupants. He was a man of few words, but his eyes held a depth that suggested he saw more than he let on. Emily, starved for interaction, began to treat his visits as an opportunity. "Why is it called the Blood Moon Pack?" she asked one afternoon, looking up from a plate of roasted venison. Dwayne paused in the doorway, his broad shoulders filling the frame. "They are a pack that glorifies slaughter. They believe the wolf is a god of destruction, and that we should not hide our nature from the human world, but use it to rule them." His voice was flat, devoid of emotion, but Emily could hear the grim history behind the words. "And Jason, your king, he doesn't believe that? Our alpha believes in protecting our own." "There is a difference between being a ruler and a butcher," Dwayne stated simply. He would offer these small, factual crumbs, never elaborating, his loyalty to his alpha a palpable barrier. But for Emily they were puzzle pieces. When she wasn't subtly interrogating Dwayne, Emily lost herself in the library. It was her sanctuary within a prison. The sheer volume of knowledge was staggering. Most books were ordinary histories, philosophies, and novels from the human world, collected over centuries. But hidden among them she found what she was looking for. Leather-bound tomes with no titles, their pages filled with an elegant, archaic script. They were histories of the Lycan people. She learned of their origins, of the first wolf, and of the great schism that had divided their kind. She read of pack law, of the sacred bond between an alpha and his pack, a connection that was both mystical and absolute. Jason was not just a king who ruled by force. He was the literal heart of his people. His strength was their strength, his pain their pain. The more she read, the more the brutish monster who had captured her was replaced by a figure of tragic epic proportions. Jason himself remained a distant, powerful enigma. She would see him from her window, a dark figure crossing the courtyard with a long, purposeful stride, his pack members parting before him like the sea before a storm. Sometimes late at night she would hear a lone, mournful howl from deep within the forest, a sound so filled with sorrow and rage that it made her own heart ache in sympathy. She knew instinctively that it was him. One afternoon, seeking to distract herself from the oppressive solitude, she sat by the window with her sketchbook, which Dwayne had quietly returned to her. She began to draw not the flowers and trees she was used to, but the world around her. She sketched the stoic guard at the gate, the intricate carving of a wolf's head on the library mantelpiece, and the play of shadows on the ancient stone walls. Then her charcoal hovered over a fresh page. She found herself sketching the face she saw only in glimpses and in her memory. A strong jaw, eyes that burned like dying stars, and a mouth set in a permanent line of command. She was drawing the king. She poured all her fear, her confusion, and her burgeoning, unwanted understanding into the sharp, dark lines. It was a small act of defiance, of capturing her captor, turning him into an object of her art, just as he had made her an object in his possession. Chapter 7. A crack in the armor. A week into her confinement, the relative quiet of the manor was shattered. From her library window, which overlooked the central training courtyard, Emily heard the escalating snarls of a serious conflict. Peering down, she saw two large lycans locked in a brutal, no-holds-barred fight. They were in their human forms, but their movements were feral, their blows landing with sickening, meaty thuds. A circle of onlookers had formed, their faces a mixture of excitement and apprehension. Several of the royal guards were trying to intervene, but they were being tossed aside like dolls, unable to break the combatants' furious focus. Ryla strode into the center of the fray, her silver hair a stark contrast to the grim scene. She barked a sharp command which was ignored. Emily watched as Ryla's face tightened with fury. She drew a wicked-looking curved knife from her belt, clearly intending to end the fight by force. Emily's breath caught in her throat. Ryla's intervention was going to turn a brawl into a bloodbath. Suddenly, a powerful silence fell over the courtyard. Every head turned. Jason had emerged from the main keep. He didn't run or shout. He simply walked toward the fight, his presence a physical force that crushed the chaotic energy. The two brawlers froze, their fists still raised, their chests heaving. The sheer, undisputed authority that radiated from him was absolute. He stopped before the two men, his golden eyes cold and assessing. "You challenge my authority in my own courtyard, Kale?" he asked one of the men, his voice dangerously soft. "You spill pack blood over a petty squabble, Torvin? He dishonored my mate." Kale spat, blood dripping from his lip. "He lies. His mate pursued me," Torvin roared back. Jason's gaze flickered between them. He listened for a moment to the frantic whispers of the onlookers, then his eyes settled on a young woman crying at the edge of the circle. His judgment was swift and uncompromising. "You will both spend a week in the cells to cool your heads. Your dispute will be settled by the elders. And Kale," Jason added, his voice dropping, "if you ever raise a hand to a pack brother over a matter your mate initiated, I will strip you of your rank myself." The finality in his tone was chilling. He had not only stopped the fight but had also seen straight to its heart and delivered a verdict that was both a punishment and a lesson. He turned his gaze on Ryla, who quickly sheathed her knife. "My guards do not escalate violence, they contain it. Remember your duty." The quiet rebuke was more cutting than any roar. As the guards led the two shamed fighters away, Jason's head lifted, his gaze sweeping over the manor. For a heart-stopping second, his golden eyes met Emily's through the window. It was a long, charged moment. He didn't look angry or surprised to see her there. It was a look of weary acknowledgement, a silent confirmation that she had witnessed this crack in his armor, this glimpse into the heavy burden of leadership he carried day in and day out. He held her gaze for another second before turning and striding back into the keep, leaving Emily with a profoundly altered perception of the Ruthless King. He was not just a beast of rage. He was a pillar of justice, a man holding his entire world together through sheer force of will. Chapter 8: The Queen's Gambit. The silent, piercing look shared between Emily and Jason had not gone unnoticed. From the courtyard below, Ryla had seen it all. She saw the way her king's eyes had locked on the human girl, the flicker of something in his expression she couldn't decipher but instantly hated. The girl was not just a prisoner. She was becoming a presence, an unwelcome variable in a carefully constructed equation. Ryla knew she had to act. Jason had forbidden her from harming the human physically, but there were other ways to break his spirit. The next evening there was a sharp knock on Emily's door. When she opened it, Ryla stood there, a bottle of deep red wine in one hand and 2 goblets in the other. She offered a smile that was all teeth. "I thought our prisoner might be lonely," she purred, brushing past Emily into the room as if she owned it. "A peace offering for our misunderstanding in the cellar." Emily's guard was instantly up. "I'm not thirsty." "Oh, but you will be," Ryla said, pouring the wine. The liquid was the color of blood. "Sit. Let's talk." Woman to woman. Reluctantly, Emily sat in a chair by the fire, watching as Ryla paced before the hearth like a caged snow leopard. "You know, you aren't the first human our pack has found wandering in the woods," Ryla began, her voice casual. "There was another girl years ago. Pretty, with hair the color of honey. She was a cartographer's daughter, lost from her father's expedition." Ryla paused, taking a slow sip of wine, her icy eyes fixed on Emily. Jason's father was Alpha then. He was a kinder, softer male. He offered the girl shelter, protection. He was grateful, of course. For a time. The air in the room grew heavy. "She started to get comfortable," Ryla continued, her voice hardening. "She thought his kindness was a weakness. She thought she could play our games, that she could charm her way into a position of power. She even tried to catch Jason's eye. He was young then, but already so powerful." Ryla stopped pacing and leaned in close to Emily, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "But she miscalculated. She didn't understand that a human is a fragile toy in our world. One night she tried to use her wiles to get a young guard to help her escape. The guard, loyal to his alpha, reported her. But the Blood Moon pack, their spies heard of her too. They saw her as a weakness in our pack, a key to our downfall. They raided us just to get to her." Ryla straightened up, her face a mask of cold satisfaction. "We fought them off, of course, but not before they took her. We never found out exactly what they did to the cartographer's daughter. But the screams we heard echoing through the valley for the next 2 nights gave us an idea. Her softness, her human weakness, brought war to our doorstep." She set her goblet down with a sharp click. "Jason learned that lesson well. He knows what a liability a human can be. He keeps you here because he has to, because he cannot risk you speaking of us. But do not mistake your cage for a home. He is a king and he needs a queen of silver and steel by his side, not a fragile pet who will get his entire pack killed. Remember that." With that, Ryla swept out of the room, leaving the untouched goblet of wine on the table like a warning. The story, whether true or not, had hit its mark, leaving a chilling seed of terror in Emily's heart. Chapter 9. An Unexpected Tutor. Jason knew the moment Ryla entered Emily's chambers. He could scent her cold fury and sharp metallic perfume from his study 2 floors below. He knew she would be spinning a cruel tale, twisting pack history into a weapon to torment the human. He allowed it not out of cruelty but as a test. He needed to know if the flicker of defiance he'd seen in Emily was a fluke or a sign of genuine strength. When Ryla left and the scent of Emily's undiluted terror filled the halls, he found his answer. Her fear was real, but she hadn't broken. She was still there, a steady, defiant heartbeat in the heart of his fortress. That night he went to her. He didn't knock. He entered the library where he knew she'd be, seeking solace in the silent company of books. She was curled in a large armchair, her sketchbook open on her lap, but she wasn't drawing. She was staring blankly into the fire, Ryla's poison clearly still working its way through her mind. She jumped when she saw him, her eyes wide with alarm. He ignored her fear, striding to one of the shelves and pulling down a heavy, unmarked tome. He dropped it onto the table in front of her with a heavy thud. "You are a prisoner in my world," he stated, his voice a low, commanding rumble. "Ryla is correct about one thing. Your ignorance will get you killed faster than her jealousy ever could. If you are to survive here, you will learn." Emily stared from him to the book. "Learn what?" "How to be a better prisoner." "You will learn our laws," he corrected, his golden eyes intense. You will learn our history. You will learn who to fear, who to obey, and when to hold your clever tongue. He opened the book, the old pages crackling. The script was the same archaic one she'd seen before. This is the law of the Alpha. All that is mine is protected. As you are within my walls, you are mine. Therefore you are protected. Ryla will not harm you again. It was a simple statement of fact, a promise delivered as an edict. For the next hour he stood over her, his presence a heavy, intimidating weight, and became her tutor. He explained the pack hierarchy, the absolute authority of the Alpha, the role of the Beta, Dwayne, and the lead warriors like Ryla. He talked about territory, about the scent markers that defined their borders, and the punishment for trespassers, a punishment he had clearly spared her from. The lesson was charged with an electric tension. Emily, recovering from her fear, began to ask questions. Not timid, frightened questions, but sharp, intelligent ones that challenged his statements. If the Alpha's word is law, why was there a dispute in the courtyard? Why didn't they simply obey? His eyes flashed with grudging respect. Because they are not mindless slaves. They have passions, jealousies, pride. The law provides structure, but I must lead their hearts. It is a constant battle. And what is the law for a human who sees a wolf become a man? She asked quietly, the question hanging between them. He held her gaze, the space between them shrinking. There is no law for that, he said, his voice dropping. Because it has never been allowed to happen. Until you. He finally stepped back, the lesson over. Read the book. Dwayne will answer your questions. Knowledge is a weapon. Learn how to use it. He turned and left as silently as he had come, leaving Emily with the heavy book, the scent of pine and power lingering in the air, and the distinct feeling that he had just handed her a shield, a sword, and a map to the heart of the man behind the monster. Chapter 10. The Scent of Intrigue. Armed with the Book of Law and a new, burning purpose, Emily began to truly see. Her world was no longer just the stone walls of her room and the pages of a book. It was the entire manor. She watched the complex social dynamics of the pack from her window, cross-referencing their interactions with the laws Jason was forcing her to learn. She saw the subtle signs of deference, the challenges for dominance among the younger warriors, and the unwavering loyalty Jason commanded from his inner circle. She used her conversations with Dwayne not just to ask about history, but to understand the present, subtly probing about their resources, their numbers, and the ever-present threat of the Blood Moon pack. One night, the tense peace of the stronghold was shattered. Shouts echoed from the main gate, followed by a flurry of urgent, heavy footsteps. The air grew thick with a scent that even her weak human nose could detect. Fresh blood and panic. From her window, Emily saw them carry in a warrior on a makeshift stretcher. His leg was mangled and his face was pale with pain. Even from a distance, Emily could see the deep, vicious claw marks that were not made by any normal wolf. The manor was on high alert for hours. Voices were kept low and urgent, and the entire pack seemed to vibrate with a mixture of anger and fear. This was not a random animal attack. This was a message. This was the Blood Moon pack. Sleep was impossible. The scouts' pain and the pack's anxiety seemed to seep through the stone walls. Long after midnight, drawn by an instinct she couldn't explain, Emily crept out of her room and down to the library. The door, as promised, was unlocked for her. He found Jason there. He stood before the massive war table, his back to the door, staring down at the sprawling maps. A single lantern cast his powerful frame in flickering light and deep shadow. One arm was braced on the table and his head was bowed, the weight of his crown seemingly pressing down on him. As he shifted to trace a line on the map, Emily saw a dark, bloody stain spreading across the sleeve of his left arm. He was injured. He hadn't been in the fight, but as Alpha, the scout's pain was his pain. He must have been injured in the immediate furious aftermath, perhaps taking his rage out on whatever inanimate object was foolish enough to be in his way. He was completely absorbed, the kingly mask stripped away to reveal the weary, wounded warrior beneath. An impulse, powerful and undeniable, moved Emily's feet. She scanned the library shelves, remembering a small, dust-covered medical kit she had seen tucked away. Grabbing it, she walked silently across the vast room. He didn't seem to notice her until she was standing right beside him. He looked up, his golden eyes clouded with pain and exhaustion. He opened his mouth to snarl at her, to order her away, but the command died on his lips when he saw the kit in her hands. He watched, stunned into silence as she placed it on the table, opened it and took out a clean cloth and a bottle of antiseptic. She didn't ask for permission. She simply reached out, her touch surprisingly gentle, and took his injured arm. It was a long, deep gash, crude and angry-looking. With deft, focused movements she began to clean the wound. Jason stood utterly still, his muscles tense beneath her fingers. He watched her, his gaze intense and raw, as this small, fragile human he had taken prisoner fearlessly tended to his injury. He could have shattered her with a single blow, yet she touched him with nothing but quiet, determined care. The air in the room was thick with unspoken emotions. In the flickering lantern light, with the scent of blood and old paper filling the space between them, a fragile, dangerous truce was forged, not with words or laws, but with a simple, healing touch. Chapter 11. A Dangerous Tenderness. The moment Emily's fingers, cool and steady, touched his skin, Jason's entire world narrowed to that single point of contact. Every instinct, honed by years of violence and command, screamed at him to pull away, to snarl at this audacious creature for daring to touch her king without permission. Yet he remained perfectly still, a statue of stone and fury, held captive by a gesture softer than a whisper. He watched her work, his senses overwhelmed. The scent of her, not of fear anymore but of clean soap, charcoal dust and something uniquely warmly female, filled his head, cutting through the metallic tang of blood. Her brow was furrowed in concentration, her touch gentle but efficient as she cleaned the angry gash on his forearm. In his world, touch was about power. A warrior's grip, a lover's claim, an alpha's dominance. It was a tool, a weapon, or a reward. But this was different. This was simple, uncomplicated care, offered freely and without fear. It was a language he barely understood, and it disarmed him more completely than any blade. "It should be stitched," she murmured, her voice soft but clinical, pulling him from his stupor. "But I don't have the proper tools. This will have to do for now." She carefully applied a salve that smelled of herbs and pine before wrapping the wound in a clean bandage. "How do you know how to do this?" His voice was a raw, gravelly thing, stripped of its usual authority. "My grandmother was an herbalist. She believed nature held the cure for every ailment," Emily replied, her focus still on tying the bandage. "She taught me a few things." He looked from her focused expression down to her hands, so delicate and small against his scarred, muscular arm. The scout who had been injured was a warrior, a hardened Lycan. Jason had felt the echoes of his pain through the pack bond, a sharp, searing agony that had fueled his own rage. He had punched the stone wall of the armory, the pain a welcome distraction. And now, this human was mending the damage with a quiet competence that was both unnerving and deeply soothing. When she finished, her hands lingered on his arm for a fraction of a second too long. A current, hot and powerful, arced between them. Emily snatched her hands back as if she'd been burned, her cheeks flushing. The air in the room grew thick and heavy, charged with a new, dangerous energy. The space between them was no longer captor and captive, but man and woman. "The attack," he said, forcing the word out to break the spell. "It was the Blood Moons. A patrol testing our southern border. They were toying with him. Sent him back as a message. He was telling her things he would only share with his inner circle. He didn't know why, except that in this moment she didn't feel like an outsider. She felt like an anchor in the storm of his responsibility. "I'm sorry," she said, and he could hear the genuine empathy in her voice. He straightened up, the kingly mask sliding back into place, the moment of vulnerability passing. He felt a sudden violent surge of protectiveness toward her, so fierce it almost choked him. It was a feeling that infuriated and confused him. She was a weakness, a liability. Ryla had been right about that. But as he looked at her, standing in the flickering lamplight, her eyes wide with a concern that was not for herself, he felt that she was the only thing in his harsh, violent world that made any sense. Without another word, he turned and strode from the library, the crisp scent of antiseptic on his arm a stark reminder of her touch. He fled not from her, but from himself, from the dangerous tenderness she had woken within the Ruthless Lycan King. Chapter 12. Ripples in the Pack. News in the keep traveled not on the tongues of gossips, but on the currents of scent and shared emotion that bound the pack together. The alpha's pain, his rage, and then his sudden, shocking calm tinged with the human scent had not gone unnoticed. By dawn, Everyone knew the prisoner had tended to the king's wound. The incident in the library sent ripples of speculation and unease through the entire pack. For Ryla, it was a declaration of war. She cornered Emily in the library the next morning, her beautiful face a mask of cold fury. She didn't bother with pretense or veiled threats this time. "You think because you played the gentle healer you have a place here?" Ryla hissed, her body thrumming with aggression. "You think that changes anything? He is the alpha. His body belongs to the pack. You had no right to touch him." Empowered by her new knowledge and the memory of Jason's raw vulnerability, Emily didn't cower. She stood her ground, her chin held high. "He was injured. I helped him. You polluted him with your weakness." Ryla snarled, taking a step closer. "Every moment he is distracted by you is a moment our enemies can strike. You are a disease in this keep and I will be the cure." Ryla's hand twitched, her nails momentarily sharpening into black talons before she forced them back. Jason's command to not harm her was the only thing holding the warrior back. "Pack law has remedies for liabilities during wartime," she whispered venomously. "Accidents happen. Prisoners get lost." Later that day, Dwayne found Emily near the window overlooking the courtyard. His face was stoic, but his hazel eyes were troubled. "Ryla's jealousy is a dangerous thing," he said quietly, not looking at her. "But it is born from loyalty. She has fought and bled for this pack and for Jason, since she was a pup. She sees you as a threat to his focus and therefore a threat to us all." "I am not a threat," Emily insisted, though her heart was pounding. Dwayne finally turned to her, his gaze direct and heavy. "In a time of peace you might be a curiosity. But now, the Blood Moon pack is at our door. The alpha must be single-minded. Anything that divides his attention, that divides the loyalty of the pack, is a threat." He was not accusing her but stating a grim fact. "Be careful," he added, his voice low. "The alpha's protection is absolute, but it cannot be everywhere at once." His warning was clear. The stone she represented had been cast into the pack's waters, and the ripples were growing into waves. Jason's actions had set her apart, but they had also painted a target on her back. She was no longer just a secret, she was a symbol, and in a deeply divided pack on the brink of war, symbols had a way of getting torn apart. Chapter 13, The King's Decree. Jason was a storm contained within the walls of a man. He grappled with the memory of Emily's touch, a phantom sensation that was both a balm and a brand. His alpha instincts, the core of his being, were in turmoil. One part, the Ruthless King, saw her as a strategic liability, a dangerous distraction when he needed to be a blade of pure, focused intent. The Blood Moon pack was not just testing their borders anymore. They were hunting, and he could feel their leader Malachi's ambition like a festering wound on the edge of his territory. Yet another part of him, a deeper, more primal part he had long suppressed, saw her differently. He saw her courage, her quiet defiance, her unexpected gentleness. He found himself seeking her scent on the air currents of the keep, his wolf drawn to her in a way it had never been to another. She was not a weakness. She was a quiet harbor in the endless war of his life, and the thought of her cowering in a single room, a target for Ryla's venom, filled him with a cold, protective rage. He pushed his warriors harder than ever, his commands in the training yard sharp enough to cut. His betas and elders felt the lash of his volatile temper. He was a king on a knife's edge, and he needed to restore balance before his own inner conflict tore his pack apart. That evening he called for the pack to assemble in the Great Hall. It was not a formal council but a mandatory gathering. He stood on the raised dais before the massive stone hearth, a formidable, solitary figure. Ryla stood at his right, her posture rigid, her face a mask of possessive pride. Dwayne stood at his left, impassive as ever. Emily watched from the shadows of the library archway, her heart pounding. The entire pack was present, their collective energy a tense, watchful hum. Jason's golden eyes swept over the crowd, commanding absolute silence. "The Blood Moons press our borders," he began, his voice ringing with power. "They seek to find a weakness in our walls, in our resolve. They will find none." He paused, letting his words sink in. "We have a guest among us. A human." A low murmur rippled through the hall. He let it build for a moment before silencing it with a glare. "She is a secret our enemies would seek to exploit," he continued, his gaze finding Emily in the shadows. "Secrets are best kept in the light where I can see them. Where I can protect them." He raised his voice and it became a formal decree, a binding law. From this moment the human Emily is no longer confined to her chambers. She is to have freedom of the keep. She is under my direct and personal protection. Any who threaten her, any who harm her will answer to me. They will find that my justice is swift and without mercy." The hall was stunned into silence. He had not just protected her, he had claimed her. He had publicly placed her under his alpha authority, elevating her from a prisoner to a protected ward of the king. It was an unprecedented, shocking move. Emily felt 100 pairs of eyes turned to her, a mixture of hatred, curiosity, and awe. Ryla's face had gone pale, her knuckles white where she gripped the hilt of her knife. Her expression was one of pure, venomous betrayal. Jason had not only protected the human, he had humiliated Ryla in front of the entire pack. He had chosen the stray over his lead warrior. Emily was no longer in a gilded cage. Jason had just thrown her into the center of the wolf pack and the time for hiding was over. Chapter 14. First steps into a wider world. The keep was a different world outside the library walls. Emily's first steps into the main hall felt like entering a new country without a map. Under the king's decree, she was free to wander, but every step was dogged by the palpable weight of the pack's eyes. Guards still watched her, but their purpose had shifted from keeping her in to keeping others away. She saw the lifeblood of the pack in motion. She watched young shifters, barely teenagers, sparring in the courtyard, their movements a brutal, joyous dance of emerging power. She saw the pack's hunters return with their quarry, the elders weaving baskets and mending clothes, and the constant, diligent work of warriors cleaning and sharpening their weapons in the armory. It was a self-contained, martial society, every member contributing to the survival of the whole. Hostility radiated from Ryla's followers, who would sneer and turn their backs as she passed. But others, the younger members and the families, watched her with a simple, wide-eyed curiosity. One small child, a girl with her mother's dark hair and father's hazel eyes, shyly offered her a wildflower before being quickly pulled away by a nervous parent. One afternoon, Jason found her standing by the edge of the training yard. He came to stand beside her, the pack members around them subtly melting away, giving their alpha a wide berth. "You are watching the training of the unblooded," he said, his voice a low rumble beside her. "They fight to establish their place, to prove they are ready to join the hunt and the defense of the pack." "It's so violent," Emily observed, watching as one boy was slammed hard into the dirt, only to spring back up with a snarling laugh. "It is our way," Jason replied. "We teach them that pain is temporary but the pack is eternal. A lesson the blood moons never learned. They believe pain inflicted on others is the true source of power." He seemed different here in his element. The weight of his crown was still there, but it was overlaid with a deep, fierce pride in his people. Emily found herself wanting to bridge the chasm between their worlds, if only for a moment. "Where I'm from, we teach our children to capture beauty, not power," she said quietly. "I'm a botanical illustrator. I hike for days just to find a single rare flower and draw it before it fades." He turned his head, his golden eyes studying her with a new intensity. "Why?" "Because it's beautiful," she said simply. "Because it's real and perfect for just a little while and I want to remember it. I want other people to see it." A fragile understanding passed between them. He, the preserver of a people, and she, the preserver of fleeting beauty. They were both fighting against the ravages of time and violence in their own way. "Show me," he commanded softly. She hesitated for a second before retrieving the sketchbook Dwayne always kept for her. She flipped through the pages of detailed orchids, intricate ferns, and the rough charcoal portrait of his own face, which she quickly passed. She stopped on a drawing of a wolfsbane flower, its delicate purple petals rendered in exquisite detail. He stared at the drawing, a strange look on his face. "This flower is a deadly poison to our kind," he murmured. "And yet, you have made it beautiful." In that moment he saw the world through her eyes, a place not just of threats and territories, but of delicate, intricate wonders worth protecting. The connection between them deepened, evolving from the physical and the political into something far more personal and profound. Chapter 15. The Bloodman's Shadow. The fragile peace of their shared moment was shattered 2 days later. Dwayne returned from a 3-day scouting mission, his face carved from granite. He and his party bypassed the courtyard and went straight to the great hall, their strides urgent and grim. The scent of old blood and enemy territory clung to them like a shroud. Jason met them at the doors. The keep fell silent, every shifter sensing the gravity of the news. "Report," Jason commanded. "Malachi sends his regards," Dwayne said, his voice tight with fury. He held up a tattered leather pouch. From it he pulled the severed claw of a massive wolf, unnaturally large, and tied to it with a strip of sinew was the primary feather of a hawk, the symbol of Jason's own pack. They left it on the northern ridge. A direct challenge. They killed a rogue to make their point. A collective snarl rippled through the onlookers. It was a profound insult, a declaration that Malachi, the Blood Moon Alpha, could kill one of their kind on their own lands with impunity. "There is more," Dwayne said, lowering his voice for his alpha's ears alone, but Emily, standing frozen near the armory door, heard it clearly. "Their scouts are everywhere. And they are not just looking for weaknesses in our defenses. They are asking questions of the rogues and the forest spirits. They are searching for someone. A human stray. A woman with hair like sun on the fields who was seen near the wolf's jaw." The blood drained from Emily's face. Ryla's cruel story, the one she'd spun to terrorize her, was not a fabrication. It was a prophecy. The Blood Moons knew she existed. Jason called an immediate council of his elders. The heavy doors of the great hall boomed shut, sealing Emily out, but she could feel the furious, desperate energy radiating through the thick wood. She was the weakness. She was the liability they had been searching for. Her presence here, once a secret to be kept, was now the catalyst for a war. She backed away from the doors, a cold, sickening dread coiling in her stomach. She had been so focused on surviving inside the keep that she had forgotten the greater danger lurking outside. Later that night, as she sat numbly in the library, the door opened. It was Jason. The council was over. His face was a mask of cold, controlled fury, but his eyes, when they met hers, were blazing with a terrifying, protective fire. "They know you are here," he said, his voice a low growl that vibrated through the floor. "Malachi will not stop until he has you. He will tear this pack apart to get to you, to use you as a weapon against me." He crossed the room in 3 long strides, stopping directly in front of her. He looked down at her, the Ruthless Lycan King facing the single greatest threat his people had ever known, and the one person he was beginning to realize he could not live without. "He wants a war," Jason snarled, his hand clenching into a fist at his side. "Then a war is what he will get." Chapter 16. The Alpha's Claim. The keep transformed overnight. The low hum of daily life was replaced by the sharp, focused energy of a pack preparing for war. Warriors moved with silent purpose, the scent of whetstone and oiling leather thick in the air. Patrols doubled and a tense, watchful silence fell over the entire territory. Emily was no longer a curiosity. She was the eye of the coming storm, and she felt the weight of it in the averted gazes and hushed whispers that followed her. Jason was a phantom of focused rage, his days consumed by strategy meetings with his elders and brutal training sessions in the yard. But his presence was a constant, oppressive weight on Emily's mind. She was the cause of this. Her simple quest for a rare flower had brought this ancient, bloody conflict to a boiling point. Late that night he came for her. She was in the library, sketching frantically as a way to control her spiraling anxiety when the doors opened. He filled the frame not as the weary warrior she had tended to, but as the alpha in his prime. His power was a tangible cloak around him, and his golden eyes burned with an unshakable resolve. "You are no longer safe in these rooms," he stated, his voice leaving no room for argument. "Ryla's jealousy has curdled into something I cannot trust, and any Blood Moon spy who breaches our walls will seek you out here first. You will stay with me." Emily's breath caught. "Stay with you? Where?" "In my chambers," he said, as if it were the most logical thing in the world. But Emily, having read the Book of Law, knew what a monumental declaration this was. The Alpha's personal chambers were the heart of the keep, a sacred space. To bring an unpaired female there, especially a human, was a possessive territorial claim that no one in the pack could misinterpret. "No," she said, her voice a shocked whisper. "Jason, that will only make things worse. Ryla will." "I am not concerned with Ryla's feelings," he cut her off, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous growl. He stepped closer, invading her space until she was forced to look up at him. I am concerned with the fact that Malachi wants to put his hands on what is mine. You will not leave my side. You will eat where I eat and you will sleep where I sleep. This is not a request. He had reverted to the ruthless king, but beneath the command she saw the raw, desperate fear in his eyes. Not fear for himself but for her. He was terrified of losing her, and this was the only way he knew how to keep her safe. To bind her to him so completely that she became an extension of himself. Dwayne appeared in the doorway to help her gather her few belongings. The beta's face was unreadable, but as he handed her the sketchbook, his eyes met hers with a look of profound, solemn respect. He understood the meaning of this act better than anyone. Chapter 17. The Heart of the King. Sharing Jason's space was like living inside the storm. His chambers were a whirlwind of focused energy. Warriors and scouts came and went, their reports delivered in low, urgent tones over the maps on his table. Emily kept to the edges, a silent observer, feeling utterly out of place yet inextricably part of the conflict. The massive bed remained a silent, unspoken battlefield between them. She slept on one side, rigid and tense, while Jason took the other, his powerful body a furnace of heat she could feel even a foot away. He rarely seemed to sleep, his mind always working, his body a coiled spring of readiness. One night she woke to a guttural sound of distress. In the moonlight streaming from the balcony, she saw Jason caught in the thralls of a nightmare. His hands were clenched into fists and a low, agonized growl rumbled in his chest. "Father," he rasped, the single word thick with a sorrow so profound it broke Emily's heart. Without thinking, she moved across the space between them and gently placed a hand on his shoulder. "Jason," she whispered. "Wake up. It's just a dream." He jolted awake, his golden eyes flying open, wild and disoriented. For a terrifying second he looked at her with the eyes of a cornered wolf, his hand shooting out to grip her wrist. But then recognition dawned and the feral light receded, replaced by a raw, staggering vulnerability. He released her, his breathing harsh in the silent room. "The raid," he said, his voice rough. "I dream of it sometimes. Of finding him, of Malachi laughing." She didn't pull away. Instead she sat on the edge of the bed, her presence a quiet offering of comfort. "Tell me," she urged softly. And in the deep, quiet hours of the night, the ruthless king finally let his armor crack. He told her of the boy he had been, a proud son who adored his diplomatic father. He described the horror of the blood moon attack, the smell of fire and death, and the sight of his father's body broken and defiled. He spoke of Malachi, then a young, ambitious killer, whose laughter had echoed in the burning hall. It was that sound, he confessed, that had forged the ruthless alpha he was today. He had sworn on his father's blood that his pack would never be weak again. Emily listened, her heart aching for the boy who had been forced to become a king. When he finished, a heavy silence fell, filled with the ghosts of his past. She reached out and gently took his hand, her fingers lacing through his. He didn't pull away. He simply held on, his grip tight, as if she were the only thing keeping him from drowning in the darkness. In that shared moment of pain and comfort, the last wall between them crumbled into dust. Meanwhile, Ryla watched the keep from the shadows, her heart a shard of ice. She saw the light in the Alpha's tower, saw the shared space and knew she had lost. Her loyalty, twisted by jealousy and obsession, finally snapped. She could not have him, she would save him from himself. She slipped out of the keep, a ghost in the night, heading for a prearranged meeting in the Deadwood Forest. She would tell the Blood Moon scouts where the Alpha was planning his ambush. But she would add a crucial piece of misinformation. That Jason would have his human weakness with him, a vulnerable target, a prize for the taking. Malachi, she reasoned, would take the girl and leave, and Jason, finally free of his distraction, would be hers once more. Chapter 18. The Double Trap. "The trap is set," Dwayne said, his voice a low rumble in the pre-dawn war room. He pointed to a narrow ravine on the map. "Our scouts have led Malachi's war party to believe we are moving our non-combatants through this pass at dusk. He will expect a small honor guard, easily overwhelmed." Jason nodded, his golden eyes cold as winter stars. "And Ryla?" "She led the final scouting party herself," Dwayne reported, his face grim. "She confirmed the route. She believes Emily will be at the center of the convoy, a prize for Malachi to snatch." A muscle clenched in Jason's jaw. Ryla's betrayal, which he had suspected for days, was now a certainty. He had scented the deceit on her, a sour note beneath her usual fury. He had let her believe her treason was a secret, allowing her to weave her own noose. "And where is Emily truly?" an elder asked, his brow furrowed with concern. "Safe," Jason stated, the word an iron shield. "She is in the deep caves below the keep with my most trusted guards. He thinks she is hiding. She has no idea she is the bait in a trap she is nowhere near." He looked at Dwayne. "You have your orders. When Malachi's forces are fully committed to the ravine, your warriors will seal the exit. No one gets out." The day was an agony of waiting. Hidden deep within the earth, Emily paced the confines of a torchlit cavern. The two guards with her were silent giants, their loyalty to Jason absolute. He hated this, the hiding, the helplessness. She was a pawn in a deadly game, her very existence the justification for the bloodshed that was about to occur. As dusk began to fall, the air in the ravine grew cold. Malachi, a massive shifter whose wolf form was scarred and grizzled, watched from a high ridge. His scouts had confirmed everything. The pathetic convoy was entering the pass. The scent of the human female, a decoy scent sachet provided by Ryla, was faint but unmistakable. He smiled, a predator's grimace revealing yellowed fangs. He would take the girl, break Jason's morale, and then slaughter the remnants of the weakened pack. "Now," he snarled. The Blood Moon warriors poured down the rocky slopes, a wave of dark fur and guttural howls. They crashed into the small convoy which scattered as planned. Malachi himself leaped into the fray, tearing through the decoy wagons, searching for his prize. But she wasn't there. A horn blast, deep and resonant, echoed from the northern end of the ravine. And then another from the south. Malachi spun around, his heart lurching with a sudden cold dread. From both ends of the pass, warriors emerged, not the small guard he expected, but the full might of Jason's pack, their eyes glowing in the twilight. Heavy rockfalls triggered by warriors above sealed the exits, trapping them completely. And then on the western ridge, a figure appeared, silhouetted against the dying sun. A massive black wolf, larger than any other, with eyes that burned like molten gold. It was Jason. And he was not looking at Malachi. His furious, betrayed gaze was locked on a single figure near the Blood Moon Alpha. Ryla, her silver hair gleaming, her face a mask of horror as she realized the true nature of the trap. She hadn't saved her king. She had just led his greatest enemy into his waiting jaws. Chapter 19. Alpha versus Alpha. The ravine erupted into a maelstrom of claws and teeth. Jason leaped from the ridge, a black thunderbolt of righteous fury, landing in the heart of the battle. He ignored the lesser warriors, his entire being focused on the grizzled Alpha. Malachi met his charge with a roar, and the two leaders crashed together in a cataclysmic explosion of power. It was a battle of titans. They tore at each other in their wolf forms, the ground trembling with the force of their blows. Malachi was a brawler, relying on brute strength and savagery. But Jason was a warrior king. He moved with a deadly, intelligent grace, his attacks precise and devastating. The pack bond surged, a psychic roar of shared rage and strength, fueling their alpha as they decimated the trapped Blood Moon warriors. "You fight for a human pet," Malachi snarled, landing a glancing blow that tore at Jason's shoulder. "I saw her scent. She is mine. You smell nothing but your own doom." Jason roared back, his jaws locking onto Malachi's leg with a sickening crunch of bone. As the battle raged, Dwayne's warriors cornered a frantic Ryla. They dragged her before Jason, who had Malachi pinned to the ground, his fangs at the rival Alpha's throat. Jason shifted back into his human form, his body covered in blood and dirt, his golden eyes blazing. "Your treachery is at an end, Ryla," he snarled, his voice echoing through the now quiet ravine. The fighting had stopped, his pack standing victorious over their broken enemies. "I did it for you," she screamed, her face wild with desperation. "To free you of the human's poison. You betrayed your alpha. You betrayed your pack," Jason decreed, his voice cold as the grave. "That is a crime for which there is no forgiveness." He did not look at her with anger anymore, but with a chilling, empty pity. "You are no longer of this pack. You are outcast. You will wander the deadlands alone, and your name will be struck from our histories. You are nothing." He turned his back on her, the ultimate dismissal, as his guards dragged her away into the darkness, her wails of despair swallowed by the night. Jason then turned his attention back to the whimpering, defeated Malachi. He could feel the pack's bloodlust, their desire for a final, fatal justice. But he looked at the cowering Alpha and saw not a rival, but the ghost of his father's murderer. Killing him would be an end, but it would not be justice. Your pack is broken. Your power is gone, Jason said, his voice low and absolute. He pressed his foot down on Malachi's broken leg, eliciting a scream of agony. You will live. You will live as a cripple, a constant reminder to all who see you what happens to those who challenge my pack. Every breath you take will be a testament to my mercy and your own failure. He turned away from the broken Alpha, his gaze sweeping over his victorious but bloodied pack. The war was over. The betrayal had been purged. He had won. But his victory felt hollow. He needed to see her. He needed to know that the one thing he had fought for was truly safe. Chapter 20. A New Dawn at the Wolf's Jaw. They brought her out of the caves into the cool night air. The keep was quiet, the scent of victory mingling with the metallic tang of blood. When Emily saw Jason standing there waiting for her, she ran. She didn't stop until she had crashed into his chest, her arms wrapping around his solid frame, her face buried in his tunic. He held her tightly, one hand tangling in her hair, the other pressing her impossibly close. He breathed in her scent, the clean, warm scent of life and safety, and the storm inside him finally stilled. The king, the warrior, the alpha, they all fell away, leaving only the man holding the center of his world. He didn't speak. He simply led her through the silent keep and out into the forest, following a path only he could see in the moonlight. He led her all the way back to the Wolf's Jaw, to the jagged rock formation where she had been sketching an orchid and he had been a monster of pure rage. They stood at its base, the moonlight silvering the ancient stones. The phantom orchids were gone, their fleeting beauty now just a memory. This is where I first saw you, Jason said, his voice a soft rumble in the quiet woods. My wolf saw a trespasser, a threat. But I saw something else. Something that made me pause. He turned to her, his golden eyes soft in the moonlight. I have lived my life by one rule: strength. I have built walls of fear and power to protect my people. But you, Emily, you walked through those walls with nothing but a sketchbook and a stubborn heart. You showed me a different kind of strength. He reached out, his hand gently cupping her jaw. I brought you here as my prisoner, but I was the one who was trapped. And you, in your gilded cage, were the only free thing in my world. Tears welled in Emily's eyes. Jason, I don't want to be your king anymore, he whispered, his thumb stroking her cheek. Not just your king. I want to be your partner, your protector, your mate. I want you to rule by my side, not as a prisoner but as my queen. His confession was not a command, but a vulnerable, heartfelt plea. It was everything she had secretly begun to hope for. Yes, she breathed, her voice thick with emotion. Yes. He lowered his head and kissed her. It was not a kiss of possession or dominance, but one of reverence and deep, soulful love. It was a promise of a new dawn, of a life built not just on survival, but on shared strength and a dangerous, beautiful tenderness. As they stood together under the stars, he leaned his forehead against hers. A slow, gentle smile, the first true smile she had ever seen from him, graced his lips. That day, he murmured against her mouth, his voice a playful, loving growl that vibrated through her. When you spat at Ryla, when I told you to do it one more time. He paused, kissing her again softly. I dare you. Do that one more time. And she did, answering his dare not with defiance, but with a laugh and a kiss that sealed their beginning, a sweet and final end to the reign of the Ruthless Lycan King, and the start of a lifetime with the man she loved.